They say you should never reveal all your cards at once. For 8 long years, I've lived by that rule, letting everyone think I was a struggling nobody. Even my wife, Sophia, the woman I thought I loved, had no idea who I really was. And that night, sitting on the corner of our leather sectional, sipping a glass of water like I didn't have a care in the world, I let them laugh. Sophia, with her flawless curls and that gleaming pearl necklace I bought her, was in her element. She loved playing hostess, especially to her circle of friends. Well, I called them her entourage. They were the type who'd wear designer dresses to a backyard barbecue just to outshine one another. And tonight, they'd found their entertainment for the evening. Me, Daniel, sweetheart, why don't you tell them about your latest job hunt? Sophia cooed, her tone syrupy sweet, but laced with the kind of venom only she could muster. The room erupted in laughter before I could even open my mouth. It wasn't the first time she'd done this, used me as the punchline to her jokes, but tonight she was really going for it. Maybe the new champagne had given her courage. Her best friend, Melissa, chimed in next. Honestly, Sophia, you're so patient. If my husband couldn't hold a steady job, I don't know what I'd do. I mean, it's not like Daniel's even trying, right? She gave me a look that could cut glass, and I forced a weak smile. That's the thing about playing a role. You have to commit, even when it stings. Inside, I wanted to laugh in their faces, to tell Melissa that her position as head of marketing was courtesy of me. I could see the resignation letter sitting in my drafts folder with her name on it. But I didn't. Not yet. Sophia leaned back, swirling her wine. Oh, Melissa, don't be too hard on him. At least he knows his way around the kitchen. The man makes a mean spaghetti, and someone has to do the dishes around here. More laughter. Even the husbands joined in, their chuckles bouncing off the vaulted ceilings of the house I paid for. The house they thought belonged to Sophia, courtesy of her supposed financial contributions. Funny how none of them noticed the cracks in her story. Did they think her part-time charity work funded this marble-floored palace? Or the luxury cars parked out front? No, but they believed what they wanted to believe because it was easier. And I let them. Sophia wasn't done yet, though. Remember that one time Daniel thought he could be a consultant? Oh, darling, you spent months preparing for that interview, didn't you? What was the company called again? Oh, right, Summit Innovations. They didn't even call him back? She erupted into laughter, clutching her sides like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. That one hit close. She didn't know it, but that interview wasn't what she thought. It had been my routine quarterly check-in, an undercover review to ensure my managers were doing their jobs. I sat across the table from my own hiring team that day, silently judging them while they judged me. It was my way of keeping things in check. And now, my own wife had turned that into a joke. The rest of the night passed in a blur of cruel remarks, shared glances, and clinking glasses. They didn't see the way my grip tightened around my drink or notice the fire building behind my calm expression. That's the funny thing about people like them. They assume the quiet ones are weak. But weakness isn't silence. Weakness is thinking your throne is secure when it's built on lies. Eventually, Sophia waved me off to the kitchen, saying, "Be a dear and get us another bottle, won't you?" I stood and did as she asked, my face a mask of quiet submission. But as I walked away, I caught the words she whispered to Melissa. "Honestly, I don't know how much longer I can do this. A man without ambition is just embarrassing." Embarrassing. That's what she called me. I felt the heat rising in my chest, but I swallowed it down. That night wasn't about reacting. It was about remembering. Every word they said, every laugh they shared, was fuel for what was to come. As I stood in the kitchen, uncorking another bottle of champagne I'd bought, I glanced at the clock. It was 9:47 p.m., less than 12 hours until the board meeting. Less than 12 hours until their world came crashing down. Let them laugh tonight, I thought, because tomorrow, none of them would have anything to laugh about. I returned to the living room, placing the bottle on the coffee table like a dutiful husband. Sophia barely acknowledged me, too busy telling the room about her latest spa day. I sat back down, taking my place in the corner, invisible and insignificant in their eyes. But inside, I was smiling. Let them mock me. Let them think I'm nothing. Because when the clock struck 9 the next morning, they'd learn the truth. The man they belittled wasn't just their equal. He was their boss. It wasn't the first time Sophia had embarrassed me in front of her friends, but this night was a masterpiece of cruelty. She wasn't just hosting. She was putting on a show. Every smile, every joke, every exaggerated story was designed to put her on a pedestal and me 6 feet under. "Melissa," she began, swirling her wine like she was born holding a glass of vintage. "You should have seen Daniel last month. He came home so excited. He thought he'd found the perfect job listing." She leaned forward like she was sharing some scandalous secret. "He spent 3 hours on the application, pouring his heart and soul into it. And guess what?" She paused, grinning like a Cheshire cat. "They didn't even bother sending him a rejection email." The room erupted in laughter. I sat there, my face a carefully composed mask, nodding along like I was part of the joke. Inside, I was calculating. Every laugh, every insult. This wasn't just about me anymore. Sophia's friends were executives, middle management, and department heads at my company. They were the very people who prided themselves on being at the top, blind to the fact that their careers hung on the decisions of the man they were mocking. Sophia was relentless. She crossed her legs, flashing her Louboutins, the ones I bought, and gestured dramatically. "Honestly, I've tried everything to help him, you know? I even suggested he try barista work at the cafe down the street. At least he'd get tips." More laughter. Even the husbands joined in, clinking their glasses in agreement. For a moment, I considered saying something. I could have told them that cafe was one of many businesses I'd acquired under a shell company, that the very job she mocked was in a building I owned. But I stayed quiet. Timing was everything, and tonight wasn't the night to shatter their illusions. Sophia's smile widened as she turned her attention back to me. "What do you think, Daniel? Maybe you should listen to me for once." Her tone dripped with condescension, as if I were a child who'd wandered into an adult conversation. I shrugged, keeping my voice calm. "Maybe you're right. I'll look into it." She wasn't expecting that. I could see it in her eyes. She thrived on conflict, loved it when I pushed back, just enough to make myself look defensive. But giving her nothing? That threw her off. Still, she recovered quickly, tossing her hair over her shoulder like a queen dismissing a servant. "Good. It's about time." I sipped my water, letting her have the last word. Let her believe she'd won. The truth was, she'd been losing for years. She just didn't know it yet. As the night wore on, Sophia's arrogance only grew. She bragged about her charity work, making sure everyone knew she was the backbone of the family. "It's not easy being the only breadwinner," she said, her voice heavy with false humility. "But someone has to keep the lights on, right?" It took every ounce of restraint not to laugh out loud. The mortgage? Paid off years ago. The cars? Paid in full. Every single luxury she flaunted to her friends was courtesy of my money, funneled through accounts she didn't even know existed. But to her, I was just the man who couldn't land a job. The irony was almost too good. Sophia's friend, Angela, leaned forward, placing a manicured hand on Sophia's knee. "Honestly, babe, you're a saint for putting up with it. If my husband were that useless, I'd have left him ages ago." Sophia sighed dramatically, as if she were carrying the weight of the world. "Oh, believe me, I've thought about it. But then I remind myself, I married for love, not ambition." I clenched my jaw, forcing a smile. Love? Was that what she called it? Because from where I stood, her love looked a lot like opportunism. She'd married me thinking I was a stepping stone, a man she could mold into the kind of success she could take credit for. But when I didn't fit the mold, she turned me into a project. Something to fix, or worse, pity. The night dragged on, each conversation more insufferable than the last. They talked about luxury vacations, designer brands, and the importance of networking. I sat there, nodding along, my presence barely acknowledged unless it was to set up the next joke at my expense. "Daniel, why don't you grab us another bottle of champagne?" Sophia asked sweetly, her smile as sharp as a blade. "You know where it is, right? In the wine fridge I bought?" The room erupted into another round of laughter. I stood, nodding politely, and headed to the kitchen. My fists clenched as I reached for the bottle, but I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't the time to react. This was the time to plan. As I uncorked the champagne, I glanced at the clock. It was almost 10 p.m. In less than 12 hours, the same people who mocked me tonight would walk into my office, completely unaware that their fates were already sealed. Sophia would wake up in a house she no longer controlled, her circle of friends decimated. And I'd finally step out of the shadows. I returned to the living room, placing the champagne on the table without a word. Sophia didn't even look at me. She was too busy holding court, basking in the glow of her imagined superiority. For a moment, I considered walking away, heading upstairs, and letting them have their fun. But no, I stayed. I watched. I listened. Every word, every insult, every smug laugh was another nail in the coffin of their delusions. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was powerless. But tomorrow, they'd learn the truth. The man they underestimated wasn't just their equal. He was their boss. And he was done playing nice. They didn't know it, but every laugh, every insult, every sideways glance they threw my way that night was fuel for what I had been preparing for years. The power I held wasn't in flashy displays or loud declarations. It was in patience, in knowing exactly when to strike. I learned that lesson the hard way, long before I ever met Sophia. 12 years ago, I was a different man. Back then, I didn't know what it felt like to be underestimated. I was young, ambitious, and full of hope. My father ran a small electronics business, a family legacy he poured everything into. We weren't wealthy, but we were proud. That pride crumbled the day corporate raiders came in, bought the business for pennies, and dismantled it overnight. I'll never forget the look on my father's face when they shut the doors for good. It wasn't just a business they took, it was his life's work. That moment shaped me. I swore I'd never let anyone take from me what they took from my father. I would build something unshakable, something untouchable, and I did. Summit Innovations wasn't born in a boardroom. It was born in my tiny apartment, where I worked around the clock, teaching myself coding, business strategy, and finance. I started with small contracts, fixing software bugs for local companies, and used every dollar I earned to reinvest in my dream. By the time I was 28, Summit was growing faster than I could have imagined. By 30, it was a powerhouse. And by 35, it was a global leader. But success comes with its own challenges. The bigger you get, the more vultures circle. I'd already had 3 relationships implode by the time I met Sophia. Each one ended the same way. They saw my success as a golden ticket, something they could latch onto and ride to an easier life. So, when I met Sophia, I made a choice. I wouldn't let her see the real me. Not yet. When we met, I was in the middle of a corporate acquisition. I just finalized a deal worth millions. But I walked into that charity gala dressed in a suit I'd had for years and drove a car that wouldn't have looked out of place in a used lot. Sophia caught my eye instantly. She was beautiful, confident, and magnetic. But what stood out most was how she treated me. When she thought I was just a struggling consultant, she was sweet, supportive even. She told me, "You'll find your place, Daniel. Just keep trying." I believed her. I thought maybe, just maybe, she was different. We dated for a year before I proposed. By the time we got married, I thought I'd made the right choice. I moved her into the house she now calls hers, though I didn't tell her I owned it outright. I let her believe we were sharing everything, that we were building a life together. I even transferred money into her account monthly, so she could feel like she was contributing financially. At first, she was kind. But success changes people, or, more accurately, reveals them. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Sophia's patience turned into criticism. Her kind words became thinly veiled barbs. She started using my lack of ambition as a weapon, first in private arguments, then in front of others. I could have stopped her at any time, but I didn't. Instead, I let her think she was in control. I let her believe she was the reason we had this life. I even let her spend money recklessly, knowing every dollar she flaunted came from my hard work. What she didn't know was that I was always watching. I wasn't just building a company. I was building safeguards. Every shell company, every private account, every legal document was designed to protect what I'd built. Sophia had no idea that every extravagant vacation, Every luxury car, every designer dress was paid for by Summit Innovations, funneled through accounts she couldn't trace. And she definitely didn't know that her friends, her inner circle of so-called high achievers, were my employees. Sophia's best friend, Melissa, was the head of marketing. Angela ran human resources. Even the husbands, with their tailored suits and smug grins, were senior executives, all handpicked by me. They thought they were untouchable, climbing their corporate ladders, making decisions they thought were theirs. But the truth was, every promotion, every project, every so-called achievement they bragged about at dinner parties was orchestrated by me. I didn't just build Summit Innovations. I controlled it. And they were pawns in a game they didn't even know they were playing. As Sophia and her friends mocked me that night, I thought about the files locked in my study upstairs. Surveillance footage of drunken company events where they let their guards down. Expense reports showing their misuse of company funds. Recorded conversations detailing their questionable business strategies. They thought they were invincible, but they didn't realize they were being watched by someone who had planned for this moment for years. Sophia's mocking voice snapped me out of my thoughts. "Daniel, are you even listening?" she said, laughing. "Honestly, I don't know how you expect to get anywhere if you're always daydreaming." I smiled, a small, calculated smile. "You're right," I said. "I should focus more." She nodded, satisfied, not realizing how true those words were. Because while she saw me as the failure in the room, I was the one holding all the power. And tomorrow, when I walked into my own company as more than just Sophia's husband, the illusion she had built would crumble. The truth about power is simple. It's not about how loudly you speak or how much you show off. Real power is quiet. It's patient. It's waiting for the exact moment when the people who underestimate you are at their most arrogant, and then showing them who you truly are. That night, as I carried another bottle of champagne into the living room, I knew I had reached my limit. The humiliation, the laughter, the dismissive looks, it had all added up over the years. But Sophia's final jab, the one she delivered with a smug grin while her friends clinked glasses, was the spark that lit the fuse. "Honestly, I don't know how much longer I can carry this marriage," she said, her voice loud enough to cut through the laughter. "I mean, I love him, but love doesn't pay the bills. I feel like I'm raising a grown child, not married to a man." Her friends gasped, not in shock but in mock sympathy. "You're so strong," Melissa said, placing a hand on Sophia's arm. "I don't know how you do it." "I keep telling her she deserves better," Angela added. "Someone ambitious. Someone who can match her energy." I paused in the doorway, bottle in hand, listening to the chorus of agreement. My grip tightened on the neck of the champagne. I'd heard enough. Every word, every insult, every patronizing comment, they were drilling into me, but not in the way they intended. Each jab didn't weaken me. It fortified me. I was done playing the role of the defeated husband. Tomorrow, I would end this charade. "Daniel, are you just going to stand there?" Sophia snapped, her tone sharp and impatient. "Bring it here already." I forced a smile, walking over and placing the champagne on the coffee table. "Sorry about that," I said softly, keeping my voice even. "Didn't mean to keep you waiting." "Of course you didn't," she said, barely looking at me. "You never do." That was it. I straightened up, looking around the room at the people who had spent the entire evening tearing me down. None of them met my eyes. They didn't need to. To them, I was invisible, unworthy of acknowledgement. But tomorrow, they'd be looking at me, really looking at me, for the first time. "I'm going upstairs," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Big day tomorrow." Sophia didn't even glance at me. "Good luck with that," she said, already turning back to Melissa. "Maybe this time he'll land something." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't let it show. I walked upstairs to the study, closing the door softly behind me. The sound of their laughter followed me, but I blocked it out. I had more important things to focus on. Inside the study, I locked the door and sat at my desk, taking a deep breath. The calm facade I had worn all night faded away, replaced by the cold determination that had driven me for years. I opened the hidden panel behind the bookshelf, revealing my secure workspace. 3 monitors lit up, displaying live feeds from the company, financial reports, and the personal files I'd gathered on Sophia and her friends. I started with Melissa, head of marketing. She had been siphoning funds from the department for years, disguising it as event planning expenses. The receipts in my files told a different story. Lavish vacations, personal shopping sprees, even a down payment on a car. It was all documented, every dollar accounted for. Angela was next. As head of HR, she had covered for executives who violated company policies, sweeping harassment complaints under the rug. Her emails, flagged by my team, were filled with thinly veiled threats to employees who dared to speak up. The husbands weren't any better. Greg, the VP of sales, had inflated quarterly figures to boost his bonuses. Scott, in operations, had been leaking proprietary information to competitors, and they all thought they were untouchable. And then there was Sophia, my wife, the woman who claimed to carry our marriage. She didn't work for the company directly, but she had benefited from it more than anyone. She had used my money to fund her image as a successful socialite, hosting charity events and galas, all while belittling me to anyone who would listen. But the part that stung the most was her betrayal. I had the evidence in front of me, messages exchanged with another man, flirtations at first, then full-blown plans for weekends away. She thought I didn't know. She thought I was too blind, too weak to see what was happening right under my nose. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. The weight of everything, the lies, the manipulation, the mockery, it should have crushed me. But instead, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't angry. Anger was too simple, too fleeting. What I felt was purpose. Tomorrow wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about taking back what was mine, about reclaiming the life and the company I had built from nothing. Sophia and her friends had spent years tearing others down, using their positions of power to enrich themselves at the expense of those beneath them. They thought they were untouchable, that their titles and connections made them invincible. But they were wrong. So very wrong. I reached for my phone, sending a message to Sarah, my most trusted executive. Everything is in place for tomorrow. Be ready. Her reply came within seconds. All set? They won't see it coming. I closed the hidden panel and leaned back, the faint hum of the monitors the only sound in the room. Downstairs, I could still hear the laughter, the clinking glasses, the sound of their arrogance echoing through the house. But it didn't bother me anymore. Let them laugh. Let them think they'd won. Because tomorrow, the laughing would stop. As I sat there, I thought about my father, about the lessons he'd taught me after his business was destroyed. Success, he'd said, isn't about being loud. It's about being patient. It's about waiting for the right moment to act. And that moment was finally here. I smiled to myself, the calm before the storm settling over me. By this time tomorrow, Sophia and her friends wouldn't just see me differently. They'd finally see the truth. The man they mocked wasn't a failure. He wasn't a joke. He was their boss. The morning of the reckoning began like any other, but for me, it was far from ordinary. The house was eerily quiet as I dressed in a tailored navy suit, one of the few indulgences I kept tucked away for occasions like this. Sophia was still asleep, her careless confidence evident in the way she sprawled across the bed, oblivious to what was coming. For years, I'd let her believe she was in control, but today, I was taking it all back. At exactly 6 a.m., I left the house, stepping into a black town car waiting outside. My driver, Charles, nodded as I slid into the back seat. He didn't ask questions. He never did. But there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes when he noticed my unusually polished demeanor. "To Summit headquarters," I said simply. He nodded and pulled away, the hum of the engine steadying my nerves. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, my most trusted executive and one of the few people who knew the truth about me. "Sarah, boardroom ready. Security briefed. Documentation finalized." Me, "Perfect. Be sure the legal team is on standby." "Sarah, they've been briefed. Good luck." Luck wasn't a factor anymore. Everything had been meticulously planned, every detail accounted for. I leaned back in my seat, watching the city wake up around me. It was almost poetic, the world going about its business, unaware that, in a few hours, 5 people's lives would be irreversibly changed. When I arrived at the office, I entered through the private service entrance. It was one of many perks that came with being the CEO of Summit Innovations, though no one had ever seen me use it. That's how I liked it. Staying in the shadows, observing from a distance, letting my carefully chosen executives think they were running the show. But today, I wasn't staying in the shadows. Sarah was waiting for me in the security office. She handed me a visitor's badge with a faint smirk. Angela Martinez, it read, the fake name I used whenever I needed to go undercover within my own company. Everything is set, she said, motioning to the monitors displaying live feeds from various parts of the building. Your wife's friends are already here. Morning meetings are underway. I glanced at the screens, watching as Melissa, Angela, Greg, and Scott arrived one by one, laughing and chatting as if it were just another day. They had no idea what awaited them. Make sure the security team knows not to intervene unless instructed, I said. I don't want any disruptions. Sarah nodded. Understood. What about your wife? Sophia. My stomach tightened at the thought of her. She wasn't part of the corporate takedown, not directly. But what I had planned for her was just as thorough. She'll know soon enough, I said, brushing off the thought. Focus on the task at hand. At precisely 8:45 a.m., I took my position in the lobby. Dressed in my unremarkable disguise, I watched as the day's players arrived. Melissa breezed in first, her head held high, barking orders into her phone. Angela followed closely behind, pausing to greet the receptionist with a hollow smile. Greg and Scott arrived together, laughing about a round of golf they'd played the weekend before. They didn't notice me sitting there, flipping through a copy of Summit's annual report like a nervous job candidate. That was the beauty of staying invisible. They never looked twice. At 9 a.m. sharp, I made my way to the HR floor for my interview. It was a charade, of course, a test of how deeply the rot had spread. I wanted to see firsthand how my own hiring process had been corrupted under their leadership. Thomas, the HR representative, greeted me with a thin smile, clearly disinterested. This will be a quick assessment, he said, leading me into a small conference room. Just a few basic skills tests and a short interview. The skills test was almost laughable in its simplicity. I made intentional errors, fumbling with questions I could have answered in my sleep. Through the glass walls, I saw Melissa walking by, glancing into the room with a look of mild disdain. She didn't recognize me, of course. To her, I was just another nobody wasting her company's time. Thomas reviewed my work with a barely concealed smirk. Well, he said, his tone condescending, this is interesting. Let's move on to the interview. The panel interview was worse. 3 middle managers sat across from me, their expressions dripping with boredom. They fired off generic questions, barely listening to my answers. At one point, one of them leaned back in his chair and checked his phone mid-sentence. By the time it ended, I had more than enough evidence. The culture they had cultivated was rotten to its core, dismissive, arrogant, and completely detached from the values Summit Innovations was built on. At 10:15 a.m., I made my way to the executive conference room. It was time for the main event. Through the partially open door, I could hear them laughing, their voices carrying the same smug tone I'd endured the night before. You should have seen her face during the interview, Melissa was saying. She looked like she hadn't touched a computer in years. Oh, that's classic, Angela replied, her voice thick with amusement. No wonder HR keeps rejecting people. Where do these applicants even come from? My hand tightened on the doorknob, but I didn't hesitate. I stepped into the room, letting the door close behind me with a soft click. Their laughter died instantly as they turned to face me. I could see the confusion in their eyes, the flicker of recognition as they tried to place me. Actually, I said, my voice steady and deliberate. I think it's time we had a real conversation. Melissa blinked, her brow furrowing. Who are you, and what are you doing here? I smiled, taking a seat at the head of the table, the seat that had always been mine. I'm Daniel Carter, I said, CEO of Summit Innovations. And as of this morning, your boss. The room fell silent, their faces a mix of shock, disbelief, and fear. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of my words sink in. Let's begin. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Melissa's confident smirk faltered first, giving way to confusion and then panic. Angela looked as if she'd seen a ghost, while Greg and Scott sat frozen, their bravado evaporating as realization crept in. I let the tension build, savoring the moment. They didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or beg for forgiveness. Melissa recovered first, or at least tried to. "Is this some kind of joke?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You? The CEO? That's impossible." "Impossible?" I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. "Melissa, you've worked at this company for 6 years, and in all that time, you've never thought to question who signs your paychecks. You never bothered to wonder who approved your promotions or overlooked your creative accounting practices. But let me assure you, it's not only possible, it's the truth." I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Instantly, the monitors on the walls flickered to life, displaying Summit Innovations' original incorporation documents. There, in bold print, was my name, Daniel Carter, founder and CEO. Beneath it was my photo, a younger version of me, smiling confidently, the same man who now sat at the head of the table, watching their world crumble. "I built this company from the ground up," I said, my voice steady but sharp, "long before any of you were here. Every policy, every division, every success you've taken credit for, it all started with me." Angela's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But you're," she stammered, struggling to find the words. "A nobody?" I finished for her. "A man who couldn't even land an entry-level position? That's what you all thought, isn't it? That I was just Sophia's failure of a husband, clinging to the scraps of her so-called success." Greg finally found his voice, though it was shaky at best. This has to be a mistake. There's no way you've been running things. We would have known." "Would you?" I raised an eyebrow, tapping my phone again. The monitors now displayed a series of emails, financial reports, and surveillance footage. Each file was damning, a testament to their years of misconduct. "You were too busy inflating sales figures, covering up harassment complaints, and funneling company money into your personal accounts to notice who was really in charge." Scott, usually the loudest of the group, sat pale and silent. I turned my attention to him. "Scott, tell me, how's your golf game? Still playing on company time? Using the Summit corporate card to cover your rounds?" His jaw dropped, but no words came out. "And Greg," I continued, turning to the man next to him, "those quarterly sales bonuses you've been bragging about at every dinner party? They're based on fraudulent reports. I have every fabricated number right here." I gestured to the monitors. "Would you like me to show the board?" Greg slumped in his chair, his hands covering his face. Angela tried a different tactic. "Look, Daniel, Mr. Carter, this has been a misunderstanding. I've always respected you. I mean, the company. And if there's anything we can do to fix this..." I cut her off with a cold smile. "Fix it? Angela, you've spent years burying complaints, silencing employees, and fostering a toxic culture. You didn't respect anything except your own comfort." Melissa, ever the opportunist, leaned forward, her tone pleading. "Daniel, we didn't know. If we'd known, we never would have." "Mocked me?" I said, my voice rising slightly. "Laughed at me? Treated me like dirt in my own house?" I stood, planting my hands firmly on the table. "Ignorance isn't an excuse. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You thought I was beneath you. And now, you'll face the consequences." I tapped my phone one last time, and the screen behind me changed again. This time, it displayed their termination letters, each one signed and dated. "Effective immediately, you're all fired. Your access to company accounts and systems has been revoked. Security is waiting outside to escort you off the premises." "No, no, no," Greg muttered, shaking his head. "You can't do this." I locked eyes with him. "I just did." Angela stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "This is outrageous. We'll sue." You'll what?" I snapped, cutting her off. "Sue me for firing you with cause? For exposing the fraud, the theft, the harassment you've swept under the rug? Be my guest, Angela. But I promise you, I have more evidence than you have excuses. The door opened, and 2 security guards stepped inside. Take them to HR for their exit interviews, I said, my tone icy. Make sure they understand the terms of their severance, or lack thereof. One by one, they stood, their confidence shattered. Melissa glared at me as if her anger could undo everything. Angela looked like she was holding back tears. Greg and Scott shuffled out without a word, their heads hanging low. Just as they reached the door, I called out, "Oh, and one more thing." They turned to face me, hope flickering in their eyes. "Don't bother reaching out to competitors. Your non-compete agreements are still in effect. And trust me, I'll be watching." The guards escorted them out, and the door closed behind them with a satisfying finality. For a moment, the room was silent again. I let out a slow breath, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. Sarah entered moments later, her tablet in hand. "Well," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "That went about as expected." "Good," I replied, straightening my suit. "Now, let's prepare for the board meeting. There's still work to do." As I walked out of the room, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, I wasn't just the man behind the scenes. I was Daniel Carter, CEO of Summit Innovations, and I had just reminded them all exactly who I was. I don't think anyone truly understands the satisfaction of watching the mighty fall until it's their hand holding the lever. As I walked back to my private office, I replayed the looks on their faces in my mind. Melissa, Angela, Greg, Scott. They thought they were invincible, untouchable. But I'd torn away their illusions in a matter of minutes. And now, it was time for the aftermath. Sarah was already waiting for me when I arrived, her tablet filled with updates and reports. "The termination process is underway," she said, her tone brisk but professional. "HR is processing their files, and security is clearing their offices." Melissa tried to call someone from the marketing team on her way out, but we've already disabled her phone and email access. I nodded, sitting behind my desk. "Good. Make sure all communications are monitored. I don't want any attempts to leak information or contact clients." "Already done," Sarah replied. "And one more thing. Angela demanded to see the board before she left. She claims she's being wrongfully terminated." I smirked, leaning back in my chair. Wrongful termination? Angela covered up harassment cases, manipulated HR records, and created a culture of fear. Let her try to spin that. I doubt the board will be sympathetic. Sarah smiled faintly, a rare crack in her usually stoic demeanor. "I didn't think so, but I figured I'd let you know." By noon, the fallout was well underway. Security cameras showed Melissa pacing the parking lot, shouting into her phone. Greg sat slumped on the curb, staring at the ground. Scott had already left, his face pale and his shoulders hunched as he walked toward his car. Angela, of course, had been escorted out kicking and screaming, her righteous indignation falling on deaf ears. It was a fitting end for people who had spent years wielding their power to tear others down. And the best part? They still didn't fully understand the scope of what I had done. I pulled up my laptop and opened the live feeds from their exit interviews. Each one was being recorded, of course, for legal purposes. Melissa sat across from the HR representative, her voice tight with anger as she tried to negotiate her severance. "This is ridiculous," she said, slamming her hand on the table. "I've been with this company for years. You can't just fire me." The HR representative didn't flinch. "Your termination is for cause," she replied calmly. "Per your contract, you forfeit severance and stock options under these circumstances. The documentation is all here." Melissa's face turned red as she flipped through the file in front of her. "This is absurd. Cause? What cause?" "Fraudulent expense reports," the representative said, her voice steady. "Unauthorized use of company funds. Gross misconduct." Melissa leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. "This isn't over," she muttered. Oh, but it was. Greg's interview was next. He didn't argue as much as Melissa, but his desperation was just as evident. "Look, I know I've made mistakes," he said, his voice low. "But you don't have to do this. I've got a family to support." The HR representative gave him the same calm explanation. "Your termination is for cause. You will not receive severance or stock options. He hung his head, muttering under his breath, "This can't be happening." Angela was the last. True to form, she came in swinging. "This is discrimination," she shouted, pointing a finger at the HR representative. "You can't do this to me. I've done nothing wrong." The representative remained unfazed. "We have extensive documentation of your actions, including emails, recorded conversations, and witness testimonies. You were complicit in covering up harassment complaints and retaliating against employees who came forward. That is grounds for immediate termination." Angela sputtered, her indignation turning into disbelief. I want to speak to Daniel." The representative glanced at the camera, then back at Angela. "Mr. Carter has already approved this termination. The decision is final." By the time their interviews were over, their access had been revoked, their emails archived, and their personal belongings packed up and delivered to their cars. Sarah confirmed the process had gone smoothly. "They're officially out," she said, placing her tablet on my desk. "The office feels lighter already." I smiled. It's amazing how much dead weight can drag a place down. But the day wasn't over yet. There was still one more person who needed to face the consequences. Sophia. At 1:30 p.m., just as I was reviewing the final reports from HR, my phone buzzed. It was Sophia. Her name flashing on the screen brought a mix of emotions: anger, disappointment, and, oddly enough, relief. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. "Hello, Sophia." "Daniel," she snapped, her voice sharp and impatient. "What the hell is going on? Melissa just called me. She said you fired her and half the executive team. Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," I said calmly. "Melissa, Angela, Greg, and Scott were all terminated this morning. It was a long time coming." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. "You can't do that," she said finally, her voice trembling. "They're your employees, my friends. You had no right." "No right?" I leaned back in my chair, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at my lips. "Sophia, I own the company. I have every right." Her sharp intake of breath was almost satisfying. What are you talking about? "For 8 years, I've let you believe I was just some aimless, unemployed husband. But the truth is, I built Summit Innovations from the ground up. Every decision, every success, every dollar you've spent came from me. And now, I've finally taken out the trash." "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No," I said coldly. "You lied to yourself. And now, you're about to see what happens when the truth finally comes out." I hung up, leaving her in stunned silence. There was more to say, much more, but that conversation could wait. For now, I had a company to run. When Sophia stormed into the Summit Innovations headquarters later that afternoon, the receptionist didn't even have time to stop her. She marched past the front desk and headed straight for the executive suite, her heels clicking angrily against the polished floors. I was waiting for her, seated calmly at my desk, reviewing the final files from the day's terminations. The door burst open, and there she was, my wife, looking every bit the picture of indignation. Her perfectly styled hair, her designer handbag swinging in her hand, and the fury in her eyes might have intimidated someone else. "Not me." "Daniel," she said, her voice sharp and demanding. "What in the world is going on?" I didn't look up immediately. I took my time, finishing the last line of a report before closing the folder and setting it neatly on my desk. When I finally met her gaze, I spoke with deliberate calmness. "Good afternoon, Sophia. What brings you here?" "What brings me here?" she repeated, her voice rising. "I just got a call from Melissa, crying hysterically, telling me you fired her, and Angela and Greg and Scott. You've lost your mind." I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. Have I? Or have I finally decided to clean up the mess they've made of my company? Sophia blinked, caught off guard by the words. "Your company?" she scoffed, shaking her head. "What are you talking about? Summit isn't yours." "It is," I said, my voice steady. "It always has been." For a moment, she was silent, the weight of my statement sinking in. Then she laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound. This is some kind of joke, right? You're trying to, what? Scare me? Humiliate me? I stood, walking around the desk and stopping just a few feet from her. Do you remember the house we live in, Sophia? The one you've always called our home? I paid for it, outright. And the cars, the trips, the charity galas. You thought your part-time work covered all that? No. Every luxury you've ever flaunted was funded by Summit Innovations. My company. Her face paled, and her hand tightened around her handbag. You're lying. Am I? I walked back to my desk and tapped a button on my laptop. The monitor on the wall behind me lit up, displaying the incorporation documents for Summit Innovations, complete with my name as founder and CEO. You've been living off my success for years, Sophia, and while you were busy mocking me, I was busy building an empire. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. You lied to me, she finally whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't lie, I said coldly. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. You saw what you wanted to see. A man you could pity, control, and belittle. You never once stopped to question why everything seemed to come so easily, why the bills were always paid, or why your lifestyle never matched what you thought we could afford. You never cared enough to dig deeper. Her eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, but of anger. You humiliated me in front of my friends. You destroyed them. I raised an eyebrow. Destroyed them? No, Sophia. They destroyed themselves. Melissa was stealing from the company. Angela covered up harassment complaints. Greg falsified sales figures, and Scott leaked proprietary information to competitors. They weren't your friends. They were parasites. Just like you. The word hit her like a slap, and for a moment, I thought she might scream. Instead, she straightened her spine, trying to reclaim some shred of dignity. You've gone too far, Daniel, she said, her voice icy. You think you can just humiliate me like this? You'll regret it. I let out a short laugh. Regret it? Sophia, for years, I've endured your mockery, your condescension, and your utter lack of respect. You made me the punchline of your jokes, parading me around as a failure while you basked in a life I built. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. Her anger boiled over then. You can't do this to me, she hissed. We're married. I'm entitled to half of everything. I walked back to my desk, opened another folder, and pulled out a stack of papers. I placed them on the table between us and slid them toward her. That's where you're wrong. You signed a prenuptial agreement when we got married. It ensures that everything I built before and during our marriage remains mine. Your entitlement ends today. She stared at the papers, her hands trembling. You're divorcing me, she whispered. I am, I said without hesitation. And before you even think about contesting it, know this. I've already spoken to the best divorce attorneys in the city. None of them will take your case. Your access to the joint account has been revoked, and your spending spree stops now. Her face crumpled as the reality of her situation set in. Daniel, please, she said, her voice breaking. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Save it. Your crocodile tears won't work on me anymore, Sophia. For years, I gave you everything. More than you deserved, and you repaid me with mockery and betrayal. I'm done. She stood there, stunned and silent, as I opened the door. Security will escort you out, I said, motioning to the two guards waiting outside. Take whatever dignity you have left and leave. Daniel, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean. Goodbye, Sophia, I said, turning back to my desk. And good luck. You'll need it. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I was free from her manipulations, her lies, and her cruelty. I had reclaimed my life, my company, and my self-respect. Sophia's downfall wasn't just the end of a toxic marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter for me. And as I sat back in my chair, watching the sun set over the city skyline, I knew that this was only the start. The day after Sophia's departure, the atmosphere at Summit Innovations was electric. The toxic fog that had lingered for years was gone, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. As I walked into the office that morning, employees stopped to greet me. Not with the stiff politeness reserved for their supposed CEO's husband, but with genuine smiles and nods of respect. For the first time, they were seeing me for who I truly was, the man who had built this company from nothing. Sarah met me at my office, her ever-present tablet in hand. "We've finalized the reorganization plans," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of excitement. "The departments affected by Melissa, Angela, Greg, and Scott are already seeing improvements. Productivity is up 25% in some areas." "Good," I replied, taking the tablet from her and scanning the data. "What about the employees who left because of them? Any word?" "We've reached out to everyone who filed complaints or resigned due to harassment or discrimination," Sarah said. 12 have already accepted reinstatement offers. The others are considering it. "Make sure they know they'll be walking into a very different environment," I said. "I want them to feel safe here. Valued." Sarah nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Understood." That afternoon, I held an all-hands meeting in the main auditorium, a first for me. For years, I had avoided the spotlight, preferring to work behind the scenes. But now, it was time to step forward and address the people who had kept Summit Innovations running, even under the shadow of corruption. As I stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. I gripped the edges of the podium, taking a moment to steady myself before speaking. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice carrying easily through the microphone. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Daniel Carter. I'm the founder and CEO of Summit Innovations." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd, but I continued. "Over the past several years, I've stayed in the background, observing how this company has grown and changed. And while I've seen incredible talent and innovation, I've also seen things that deeply disappointed me. A culture of fear, favoritism, and dishonesty took root here, and I take responsibility for not addressing it sooner." The room was completely silent now, every pair of eyes fixed on me. "But that ends today," I said firmly. "The people responsible for that culture are gone. And moving forward, this company will be a place where everyone, regardless of their position, feels valued, respected, and empowered." I outlined our new initiatives: anonymous feedback channels, enhanced HR protocols, and mentorship programs for employees who wanted to grow within the company. I spoke about accountability and collaboration, about building a culture of trust and innovation. And when I finished, the room erupted into applause. For the first time in years, I felt proud, not just of what I had built, but of what it was becoming. Over the next few months, the transformation was remarkable. Departments that had been bogged down by inefficiency and favoritism began to thrive. Jennifer, a brilliant programmer who had left after being sidelined by Melissa, returned to lead our new AI division. Under her leadership, we filed 5 patents in 6 months, more than the company had in the past 3 years. The Thompson account, one of our largest clients, doubled their contract with us, citing our new leadership and transparency initiatives as key factors. Other clients followed suit, and our revenue soared. But the most rewarding part wasn't the financial success. It was seeing the employees flourish. People who had once been afraid to speak up now shared ideas openly. Collaboration replaced competition. And for the first time, Summit Innovations felt like the company I had always envisioned. As for Sophia and her friends, their downfall was swift and brutal. The evidence I had gathered against them was airtight, leaving no room for retaliation. Melissa and Angela's reputations were in tatters, their misconduct exposed to every potential employer. Greg and Scott faced lawsuits for fraud and breach of contract, their careers effectively over. Sophia, meanwhile, had retreated into silence. She moved out of the house within a week of our confrontation, her pride too wounded to fight me in court. The divorce was finalized quickly, thanks to the ironclad prenuptial agreement. I later heard she was staying with her sister, trying to piece together a life that didn't revolve around appearances and materialism. For a while, I thought about her often, not with anger, but with a strange sense of relief. In the end, she had done me a favor. Her betrayal had forced me to confront the cracks in my life and take back control. And for that, I was grateful. 6 months after the shakeup, I stood in my office, looking out over the city. The skyline was painted in hues of gold and orange as the sun set, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Sarah knocked lightly on the door before stepping in. "Final numbers are in," she said, handing me a report. "Profits are up 60%. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and the mentorship program has a waiting list." I smiled, setting the report down. "It's amazing what people can accomplish when you get rid of the dead weight." Sarah chuckled softly. "There's one more thing," she said. "The press is still asking for an interview. They want to know how you managed to pull off such a perfect transformation." I shook my head. "Let the results speak for themselves. I'm not interested in publicity." She nodded, turning to leave, but paused at the door. "Any regrets?" she asked, her tone softer than usual. I thought about it for a moment. About Sophia's mockery, the betrayal of her friends, and the years I had spent hiding in the shadows. But then I thought about the company we had rebuilt, the people who were thriving, and the future that lay ahead. "No," I said finally. "No regrets. Just lessons." In the end, revenge wasn't about destroying what was broken. It was about rebuilding something better. And as I stood there, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, I knew that Summit Innovations wasn't just a company anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, redemption, and the power of starting over. And I was ready for whatever came next. I knew something felt off the moment she brought it up. "A family dinner at my parents' place," she had said, all smiles, her tone light, as if it were any other invitation. But I knew better. I knew what those nights really were, nights designed to remind me, in subtle and not-so-subtle ways, that I didn't belong. I had been through this before. The polite dismissals, the way they'd glance at me when I spoke, as if humoring a guest rather than acknowledging a family member. The way her father would steer conversations towards real success stories, always about people who inherited wealth, never about those who built it from the ground up like I did. But after years of enduring it, I had convinced myself that this time might be different. We had been married long enough. Maybe, just maybe, they had finally accepted me. So I agreed. I put on my best suit, the one she had bought me for occasions like these, and I showed up ready to be the respectable, patient husband they could no longer ignore. The estate was as intimidating as ever, towering and extravagant, the kind of house that wasn't just big, it was designed to feel unapproachable. The long driveway stretched endlessly, lined with imported trees and statues, leading up to an entrance grand enough to belong to royalty. A valet took my car, and as I stepped onto the stone path leading inside, I could already hear the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses from the dining hall. Inside, nothing had changed. The same massive chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they seemed unreal. The same portraits of her ancestors lined the walls, their stern faces watching over the room, a reminder of the bloodline they were so proud of. The scent of expensive wine and aged wood filled the air, mixing with the distant sounds of a pianist playing something classical, something expensive. I spotted Vanessa instantly, standing with her mother near the grand dining table, deep in conversation. Her father, Richard, was pouring drinks for a group of men in tailored suits, laughing too loudly, as if he had just delivered some profound wisdom. Her siblings were scattered, comfortable in their element, slipping seamlessly between conversations. And then there was me. I adjusted my cuffs, took a deep breath, and walked in. Vanessa turned, her eyes lighting up as she saw me. She walked over, smiling, and for a brief moment, I thought, maybe this time will be different. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Hey, you made it." She leaned in and kissed my cheek, her perfume familiar, comforting. "Come, let's get to our seats." I followed her toward the grand dining table, relieved to finally blend into the setting. But just as I reached for a chair, she stopped, her hand gently touching my arm. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice as soft as ever. "I saved you a seat at the other table." I blinked. She gestured toward the far corner of the room, where a smaller, mismatched table sat, away from the grand setup. There, a handful of younger cousins and teenagers were seated, their table set with plastic cups and smaller plates, as if it were a designated spot for the unimportant. For the children. I waited for her to correct herself, to laugh and say it was a joke. But she just smiled, as if this was nothing. as if this was normal. I glanced back at the main table. No one had even noticed. Or maybe they had, and they just didn't care. Conversations continued. Drinks were poured. Laughter filled the air. The whole room moved on, completely unbothered by the fact that the man who married into their family was being seated like an afterthought. I looked back at Vanessa, searching for an explanation. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice low. She didn't even flinch. "It's just for tonight," she whispered quickly. There wasn't enough space at the main table, and we didn't want to rearrange everything last minute. I stared at her, my mind racing. After all these years, all the dinners, all the times I swallowed my pride and played the role of the respectful son-in-law, and this was where they still placed me? She reached for my arm again. "It's not a big deal, Daniel. It's just a seat." No, it wasn't just a seat. It was a message. It was a reminder that no matter how long I had been in this family, no matter how much I had given, no matter how much I had tried, I would never truly be one of them. And for the first time, I felt it. Not just anger, not just frustration, but something deeper. A cold, final understanding. I wasn't wanted here. Not really. Not as an equal. I let out a slow breath. My fingers tightened at my sides, then relaxed. I didn't argue. I didn't ask her to change her mind. I simply stepped back, took a final look at the grand dining table, the chandeliers, the laughing faces of people who saw me as less, and I made my decision. Without a word, I placed my napkin down, turned on my heel, and walked straight toward the exit. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. I walked with the same composure, the same calm that they had always expected from me. Only this time, I wasn't playing along with their script. No one noticed. Not at first. Vanessa barely glanced up, assuming, like always, that I'd accept it, that I'd sit where I was told, that I'd stay quiet. But I didn't. I reached the door, pushed it open, and stepped outside into the cold night air. The wind bit against my skin, sharp and unforgiving. But it felt good. It felt real. I took a slow breath, watching the mist of it disappear into the night. And then, for the first time in years, I let go of the weight I had been carrying for so long. I wasn't their outsider anymore. I wasn't their problem. I was done. The night air was sharp, cutting through my suit as I stood outside that towering estate. My breath steady, but my mind anything but. My hands clenched at my sides, the weight of years of humiliation pressing down on my chest, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. I wasn't just walking away from a dinner. I was walking away from the role they had assigned me. The quiet, tolerated husband. The outsider. The one who was supposed to nod and smile and accept every subtle jab, every whispered dismissal, every reminder that no matter how much I loved Vanessa, I would never be good enough for her family. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't going to take it. I could still hear the muffled voices from inside, the clinking of expensive glassware, the laughter of people who had no idea that something had just shifted, that I had just made a decision I couldn't take back. I should have left. I should have walked to my car, driven home, and let them deal with their own arrogance. But something held me there. Some deep, burning need for closure, for an answer. So, instead of leaving, I turned back around and stepped inside. The warmth of the house hit me instantly, but it felt suffocating now. Too bright, too polished, too full of people who saw me as nothing more than Vanessa's poor, self-made husband. The man who had somehow tricked his way into their prestigious family. I walked back toward the dining hall, my steps measured, my face carefully blank. Inside, the dinner was in full swing. Plates being passed, wine poured, conversations flowing as if nothing had happened, as if I had never been there to begin with. Vanessa was laughing at something her brother had said, her posture relaxed, at ease. Not a single trace of concern on her face. I stopped just before the doorway, watching her. She hadn't even looked for me, hadn't even noticed I had walked out. The realization hit harder than I expected, a sharp, ugly thing twisting in my chest. I had spent years trying to fit into her world, trying to earn a place at her family's table, and yet, when I finally walked away, when I left without a word, she didn't even blink. I took another step forward, past the threshold of the room, and finally, someone noticed. "Ah, Daniel, there you are." Her father, Richard, always the first to acknowledge me when it was convenient. He raised his glass in my direction, his tone overly friendly, almost patronizing. "We were wondering where you disappeared to." I met his gaze evenly, but I didn't answer. Vanessa turned then, finally registering my presence. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her surprise with a smile. "You're back," she said smoothly, as if I had just stepped away for a phone call. I ignored her and looked at the table. Every chair was filled, every seat taken, except one, at the corner, at the small, rickety side table where the children sat, their plates already half empty, the conversation light and unimportant. That was where I was supposed to sit. That was where they had placed me. Slowly, I turned back to Vanessa. "You really expected me to sit there?" The table was silent now, all eyes on me. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Daniel." "No." I cut her off, my voice calm but firm. "I want to hear it from you. You really thought it was acceptable to seat me, your husband, at the kids' table?" A few people exchanged awkward glances, but no one spoke. Vanessa let out a small, nervous laugh, as if trying to downplay the moment. "It's just a table, Daniel. It wasn't meant to be a big deal." I let her words hang between us for a moment. Then I turned to Richard. "And you?" I asked. "What do you think?" Richard raised a brow, clearly unimpressed with the fact that I was calling him out in front of his guests. "I think you're overreacting, son." "Son." He only ever called me that when he was trying to put me in my place. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Of course you do." I turned to Vanessa's mother next. "Margaret." She cleared her throat, adjusting the napkin on her lap. "Daniel, this is a family dinner. There's no need to make a scene." I took a slow breath, then nodded. "Right, a family dinner. And yet, despite being married to your daughter for years, I was still treated as an afterthought." Vanessa's brother, Eric, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Come on, dude. It's not that deep. It's just seating arrangements." I met his gaze. "Would you have been fine sitting there?" Eric scoffed. "Of course not. But then don't tell me it's not a big deal." Silence. I turned back to Vanessa, the last thread of patience unraveling inside me. "Tell me something," I said, my voice quieter now, but sharper. "If I had asked them to seat you there instead, would you have accepted it?" She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "You wouldn't," I said before she could speak. "Because you know what it means. You know what it implies." Vanessa's expression wavered, and for the first time that night, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, not remorse, but realization. She had never thought about it that way, because she had never needed to, because she had never been on the receiving end of it. I let out a slow breath and stepped back. "Enjoy your dinner," I said simply. Then I turned and walked away. For the second time that night, I left without waiting for a response. But this time, I knew they were watching. I knew, the moment I stepped outside, that the mood in that dining room had shifted. That for the first time, they were forced to acknowledge what they had done. And as I walked toward my car, hands steady, mind clear, I knew one more thing. I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. The night was colder than before. The air had a crisp bite to it, seeping through my suit as I walked down the grand stone steps leading away from Vanessa's family estate. My breaths were slow, measured, misting in the winter air, but inside, I burned. Not with rage, not even with sadness, just a deep, cutting certainty. I was done. I didn't slam the door behind me when I left. I didn't yell. I didn't create a spectacle. I had done exactly what they expected of me for years. Kept my composure, stayed polite, never caused a scene. Except, this time, I wasn't doing it for their comfort. This time, I was doing it for myself. The estate's long driveway stretched out before me, winding down toward the gates where my car was parked. My footsteps echoed against the pavement, the only sound in the stillness of the night. The further I walked, the lighter I felt, like I had been carrying something heavy on my shoulders for years, and I had finally decided to set it down. Behind me, the house remained lively, filled with warm lights, laughter, and the clinking of expensive silverware. For all their talk of family, for all their pretense of togetherness, they hadn't even noticed I was gone. Or maybe they had, and just didn't care. I reached my car, pressing the key fob to unlock it. The interior light flickered on, casting a dim glow against the darkness. I stood there for a moment, one hand resting on the cold metal of the door handle. I could leave, drive away, go home, but something in me resisted. It wasn't just about tonight. It wasn't just about the humiliation of being told, in the most deliberate and degrading way, that I wasn't an equal in my own marriage. It was about the years leading up to this moment. The comments, the dismissals, the way Richard would talk about real success in front of me, making it clear that my self-made business would never compare to his family's wealth. The way Margaret always looked relieved when I didn't say much during dinners, as if my silence was a favor to her social standing. The way Vanessa, my own wife, laughed along with their casual condescension, never once standing up for me. For years, I had convinced myself that love was enough, that marriage meant patience, endurance, understanding, that eventually they would accept me. But tonight, I had finally understood the truth. They never would. And worse, Vanessa never wanted them to. I exhaled slowly, the realization settling deeper. She hadn't fought for me. She hadn't argued when they seated me like an outsider at my own family dinner. She hadn't even tried to fix it. Instead, she had smiled at me and expected me to go along with it. That's what hurt the most. Not Richard's arrogance, not Margaret's silent judgment, not Eric's dismissiveness. Her. The fact that she was so comfortable with the way they treated me, that she had grown up in that world and saw nothing wrong with it. The front door of the estate opened suddenly, spilling light onto the stone steps. I didn't turn, but I heard the familiar click of heels, quick, hesitant steps. Vanessa. I braced myself as she approached. Daniel. I didn't respond. She hesitated behind me, as if trying to gauge my mood. Why did you leave? The question was so absurd, I almost laughed. Instead, I turned to face her, keeping my expression unreadable. You really have to ask? She crossed her arms, shifting on her heels. It was just a misunderstanding. I let out a slow, humorless breath, shaking my head. A misunderstanding? Yes, she said, stepping closer, her voice softer now. You're making it bigger than it is. I stared at her, waiting for an apology, for any sign that she understood what she had done. But it didn't come. Instead, she let out a small sigh, her expression frustrated, as if I was the problem. Look, I didn't think it was that serious. It was just a seating arrangement. You could have sat down and joined us after. No one would have cared. That's the problem. I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. No one would have cared. She blinked, caught off guard. I took a step forward. You don't get it, do you? You don't see how that was a message. How it wasn't just about a seat. It was about respect. About my place in this family. About the fact that after all these years, your parents still see me as beneath them. And you let them. She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. You let them. I repeated, my tone sharper now. You didn't argue. You didn't defend me. You didn't even look surprised when they treated me like I didn't belong. And you expect me to just sit there and take it? Vanessa's face faltered for the first time. Daniel, she said quietly, her voice different now, uncertain. But I wasn't done. You know, I spent years trying to earn their respect, trying to prove that I deserved to be part of this family. But tonight, I realized something. She swallowed. What? I held her gaze. I don't need their respect. I don't need their approval. I don't even need to be part of this family. Silence. The words hit her harder than anything I had said before. For the first time, she looked afraid. Are you saying you don't want to be with me anymore? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted her to feel what it was like to be the one left in uncertainty. I'm saying, I finally said, that I won't stay in a marriage where I'm treated like an afterthought, where I have to fight for basic respect, where my own wife doesn't stand up for me. She reached for my hand, but I took a step back. Daniel, please, just come inside. We can talk about this later. I shook my head. No, now is when we talk about it. Because for the first time, you're realizing what it feels like to be the one standing outside, not knowing where you belong. She flinched. Good, because that was exactly how I had felt for years. I turned away from her and opened my car door. Where are you going? She asked, her voice desperate now. I looked back at her one last time. Home. And then, without another word, I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving her standing there, alone. The hum of the engine was the only sound in the car as I drove away from the estate, my hands firm on the steering wheel, my mind racing. I had walked away. Not just from a dinner, not just from another night of their condescension, but from the entire charade. And yet, the moment I crossed the iron gates and pulled onto the empty road, a strange silence settled in my chest. Was this it? Was this the beginning of the end? For years, I had bent over backward trying to fit into Vanessa's world. I had tolerated their insults, their dismissals, their thinly veiled contempt, all for her. But tonight had been different. It wasn't just them treating me like I didn't belong. It was her, the woman I had married, the woman who was supposed to have my back. And now, she was still there, inside that house, with them. Would she follow me? Would she fight for me? Or would she stay exactly where she had always been, comfortable in a world where I was nothing more than an outsider? I tightened my grip on the wheel and exhaled slowly. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. I knew who it was. I knew what they would say. But I wasn't in the mood for excuses, for empty words meant to smooth things over. For years, I had played along, pretending like it didn't bother me, laughing off their insults to keep the peace. But tonight, something had shifted. Something had broken. The car cut through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting against the windshield as I made my way home. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine, staring at the darkened windows of our house. It looked the same as always, warm, inviting, familiar. But something about it felt different now. It didn't feel like home. I stepped out, the night air sharp against my skin, and walked to the front door. Unlocking it felt mechanical, as if I were stepping into someone else's life rather than my own. The house was silent when I entered, the absence of Vanessa heavier than I expected. She wasn't here. She had stayed at the dinner. That realization hit harder than I thought it would. I sighed, running a hand through my hair, and made my way to the living room. I wasn't tired, not really, but my body felt drained. I sat down on the couch, leaning forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the coffee table without really seeing it. Then, my phone buzzed again. I finally looked at it. Vanessa, where are you? Come back inside. You're overreacting. I scoffed. Overreacting. Of course. She still didn't get it. Another buzz. Margaret, her mother, Daniel, this is childish. This is a family gathering. Act like an adult. Another. Richard, her father, enough of this nonsense. Get back here before you embarrass yourself further. Embarrass myself? A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. I was the one embarrassed. After they treated me like a second-class citizen in my own marriage? After they openly humiliated me in front of an entire room? I rubbed a hand over my face, the exhaustion settling deeper in my bones. They weren't panicking because they cared. They were panicking because I had done something unexpected. Because, for the first time, I had refused to play my part. My phone kept vibrating, one message after another, each one filled with the same dismissive tone, the same condescending expectation that I would fall back in line. Eric, her brother, dude, what the hell? Just come back. You're making it worse. Melissa, her sister, you're making mom upset. This isn't necessary. It was all about them. Their discomfort. Their embarrassment. Not one message asked how I felt. Not one of them apologized. Not even Vanessa. I exhaled sharply, standing up and pacing the room. My chest felt tight, my mind whirling. I had always known her family looked down on me, but tonight had exposed something worse. Vanessa didn't just tolerate their behavior. She accepted it. She condoned it. She expected me to accept it too. And that was something I could never ignore again. I looked down at my phone, scrolling through the endless flood of messages, then paused. My eyes landed on the picture I had taken earlier, of the tiny table in the corner where they had expected me to sit. The image spoke volumes. It was proof. Without thinking twice, I clicked on the family group chat and sent it, along with a single caption. Interesting choice of seating for your son-in-law. Hope the adults are enjoying their meal. Then, I turned off my phone and waited. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I simply stood there, staring at the blank screen, feeling the weight of what I had just done. I had never pushed back before. I had always let them have their way, let them brush off my feelings, let them pretend I didn't matter. But now, they had to confront it. Minutes passed. Then, my phone buzzed violently. A dozen missed calls. Messages coming in rapid succession. Vanessa, Margaret, Eric, even Richard, the man who barely spoke to me unless it was to make a passive-aggressive comment, was now demanding that I answer my phone. They were panicking, because, for the first time, they weren't the ones in control. I didn't pick up. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the counter. I wasn't in a rush. Let them sweat. Let them wonder. Let them feel what it was like to be ignored, dismissed, pushed aside. After all, they had done it to me for years. Another call came through. This time, I let it ring out just long enough before answering. Vanessa's voice was tight, controlled, but there was an edge of unease. Daniel, we need to talk. I took a slow sip of water. Then talk. A pause. She wasn't used to this version of me. You can't just leave like that, she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. It's Christmas. My family is upset. I let out a low chuckle. Oh, they're upset? That's interesting, because I was humiliated in front of them, and not one of you cared until I walked out. Silence. Then, the inevitable excuse. It wasn't meant that way. You're overthinking it. There it was. The gaslighting. The dismissal. The refusal to acknowledge what had really happened. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice even. Vanessa, I want you to hear me clearly. I am not some outsider to be pushed aside. I am your husband, your partner. And if you can't see me as your equal, maybe you shouldn't have married me. She sucked in a breath. For the first time, she had no response. And I wasn't waiting for one. The silence on the other end of the call stretched longer than I expected. For a moment, I wondered if Vanessa had hung up. If she had finally run out of excuses, of justifications, of empty reassurances. But then, she let out a breath, shaky, uneven. Daniel. Her voice was softer now, hesitant. Can we talk about this in person? I leaned back against the kitchen counter, gripping my phone a little tighter. She wanted to talk? Now, after hours of pretending I didn't matter, after letting her family humiliate me like I was nothing, I let the silence linger, making her feel the weight of her request. Then I spoke, my voice steady but firm. No, you don't get to control when we talk about this, Vanessa. You had your chance, back at that dinner, when you could have stopped it from happening in the first place. A pause. Then, I didn't think it would bother you this much. I almost laughed. Bother me? I had swallowed so much over the years, bit my tongue, forced a smile, let them dismiss me time and time again. And now, when I finally reached my breaking point, she acted like I was the one making a scene. I'll call you later, I said flatly, and ended the call before she could argue. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. I had expected her to be defensive. I had expected her to make excuses. But hearing her say, I didn't think it would bother you this much, that cut deeper than I anticipated. Because what she really meant was, I didn't think you'd stand up for yourself. She had grown used to me enduring, to me being the husband who let things slide for the sake of peace. She had never truly considered that I might walk away. Well, now she knew. My phone buzzed again. Not a call this time. A message. From Vanessa. I hesitated, then unlocked my screen. Vanessa. Daniel, please. Let's not do this over text. I don't want to fight. I stared at the message for a long moment. She didn't want to fight. Of course, she didn't. Because fighting meant she would have to acknowledge what she had done. Fighting meant she would have to admit that she had let them disrespect me, that she had been complicit in it. I scrolled through the other messages that had come in while we were on the phone. Margaret, her mother, Daniel, be reasonable. We all love you. No one meant to offend you. Richard, her father, you're acting childish. If you want respect, you earn it. Walking away won't get you anywhere. Eric, her brother, dude, this is ridiculous. Just come back and stop making a big deal out of nothing. I clenched my jaw, staring at the words. Nothing. To them, this was nothing. They didn't see it. They didn't want to see it. I scrolled further, past the dismissive messages, until I reached the one I had sent earlier. The picture of the tiny table where they had expected me to sit, accompanied by my single-line caption. Interesting choice of seating for your son-in-law. Hope the adults are enjoying their meal. I knew it had struck a nerve. Their frantic messages had only increased after I sent it. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about how they looked. That's when a new message popped up, this time from an unexpected number. Her aunt, the one who usually stayed quiet during these family gatherings. The one who never joined in when they mocked me, but never defended me either. Caroline, I saw your message. I just wanted to say, I understand why you left. You deserved better tonight. I'm sorry no one said it at the time. I blinked. I reread her words, my fingers tightening around my phone. Someone got it. Someone, even if it wasn't Vanessa, had seen what happened and acknowledged it. And yet, it only made me angrier. Because if Caroline saw it, then so did the rest of them. They just didn't care. I exhaled sharply and typed a reply. Me. Thank you for saying that. But it shouldn't have taken me leaving for someone to admit it. I sent it without hesitation. A minute later, She replied, Caroline, you're right. It shouldn't have. I hope Vanessa understands what she did before it's too late. I stared at her words, feeling a weight settle in my chest. Before it's too late. It already felt too late. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about tonight. This was about every time Vanessa had let them treat me like an outsider. Every time she had laughed along when they belittled my work. Every time she had stood silent when they dismissed my accomplishments. I had always told myself it didn't matter. That we were a team, that our marriage was stronger than their opinions. But was it? Or had I just been lying to myself all along? I sat there, the silence pressing in around me, until another buzz broke through my thoughts. Vanessa again. Vanessa, I'm coming home. Can we talk? I let out a slow breath. She was coming home. Not because she had realized what she had done. Not because she had defended me in that house. But because I had forced her to confront it. And for the first time, I didn't know if that was enough. I put my phone down and ran a hand over my face. She would be home soon. And when she walked through that door, we would have a conversation we should have had years ago. But this time, I wasn't going to let her brush it aside. This time, she was going to listen. And this time, I wasn't the one begging to be heard. I sat in the dimly lit living room, my mind racing as I waited. The silence of the house pressed in around me, thick and heavy, but I didn't turn on the TV or scroll through my phone. I just sat there, staring at the front door, waiting for Vanessa to walk through it. I had expected this moment for years, the inevitable confrontation. I had always known that one day, I would snap. That one day, I would stop swallowing my pride for the sake of keeping the peace. That one day, she would finally see that her family's behavior wasn't just annoying, wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was degrading. It was humiliating. And the worst part? She had let it happen. The sound of tires crunching over gravel outside made me exhale slowly, bracing myself. I heard the car door slam, hurried footsteps up the porch steps, and then the jangle of keys. A moment later, the door swung open. Vanessa stepped inside, her expression tense, her coat still clutched tightly in her hands as if she had driven here in a hurry. Her eyes locked onto mine immediately, scanning my face, searching for an opening, an easy way back in. I didn't give her one. She closed the door behind her and let out a slow breath. Daniel. I leaned back against the couch, arms crossed. You're home earlier than I expected. Her lips parted, but she hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. I left as soon as I could. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Did you? Or did you wait until the embarrassment set in? She flinched. Just barely. But I saw it. Daniel, please, she said softly, stepping closer. Can we just talk? I nodded once. Go ahead. She hesitated again, her grip on her coat tightening. I didn't think it would turn into all of this. All of what? I pressed. She exhaled sharply. This. You leaving. The texts. The entire family blowing up my phone because they don't know what to do with this situation. I arched a brow. So, let me get this straight. You're upset because of the situation, not because of what actually happened. She let out a frustrated sigh. No, that's not what I meant. Then say what you mean, Vanessa, I said evenly. Her jaw tightened, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, something she wasn't used to feeling in our arguments. Uncertainty. Because for the first time, I wasn't bending. I wasn't smoothing things over. I wasn't letting her dictate how this conversation would go. I made a mistake, she finally admitted. I should have handled it differently. I tilted my head slightly. What part of it was a mistake? She frowned. Daniel, don't do this. No, I need you to say it. I pressed. Because if you can't even acknowledge what the problem was, then we don't have anything to talk about. She swallowed, looking away for a moment before sighing. I should have made sure you had a seat at the main table. I should have said something when I saw what my parents did. I studied her, waiting. But, she sighed again, her frustration mounting. But it wasn't intentional, Daniel. My parents weren't trying to hurt you. They just what? I cut in, my voice sharp. She faltered, looking at me like she had never really seen me before. They just don't respect me. I finished for her. That's what you were going to say, wasn't it? Her silence was deafening. I leaned forward, my voice quieter now, but no less firm. You knew what they were doing. You knew the message they were sending. And you let it happen anyway. She swallowed hard, her face betraying her internal battle. They were calling me less than. They were showing me, and everyone else, that I'm not really part of your family, that I never have been. And you just sat there and smiled like it was nothing. Her eyes glistened, her throat bobbing as she struggled to find words. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't think about it that way." I laughed, shaking my head. "That's the problem, Vanessa. You never do." She let out a shaky breath, finally dropping her coat onto the chair beside her. She looked exhausted, like the weight of the night had finally caught up with her. "My family is in full damage control mode," she admitted. I leaned back, arms still crossed. "Of course they are. They're not used to being called out." She nodded slowly. They're worried about how this looks." I snorted. "Oh, I'm sure they are." She bit her lip, hesitating again. "My mom wants to call you. My dad, too. They think if they just explain, they can save face." I finished for her. She exhaled sharply, rubbing her forehead. "Yes." I studied her, my next words careful but firm. "What about you?" She looked up, confused. "What?" I tilted my head. "What do you think? Do you actually believe they did nothing wrong? Or are you just caught between them and me, trying to make this all go away?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. And there it was. The hesitation. The unwillingness to pick a side. I let the silence stretch between us before nodding. "That's what I thought." Her brows furrowed. "Daniel, that's not fair, isn't it?" I shot back. "I walked away tonight because I realized something. I realized that no matter how much I've tried, I will never be good enough for your family. And the worst part is, neither will you." She inhaled sharply, clearly not expecting that. I continued, my voice low but steady. "You think they respect you? You think they actually see you? No. They see a daughter who married beneath her station. A wife who should have chosen better. And as long as you keep trying to make them happy, you'll never be happy yourself." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "That's not true, isn't it?" I said again, my voice quieter now. She shook her head, her expression cracking. "Daniel, I don't want to lose you." I exhaled, feeling the weight of her words. "I don't want to lose you either, Vanessa," I admitted. "But I also don't want to be in a marriage where I'm constantly treated like an outsider, where I have to fight for basic respect, where my own wife doesn't stand up for me when it matters." She sniffed, wiping at her eyes. "So what do we do?" I took a slow breath. "That's up to you." She looked up at me, desperate now. "What do you mean?" I met her gaze, unwavering. "I mean, I've already made my decision. I'm not going back to that house. I'm not playing their games. If you want to stay in this marriage, you need to choose. You can't keep trying to please them while ignoring what that does to us." She stared at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Fear that she might actually lose me. Fear that for the first time in our marriage, she was the one who had to fight to keep me. And the terrifying part? I didn't know if I wanted her to succeed. Vanessa sat across from me, her body tense, her fingers curled into her lap. The weight of my last words hung in the air between us, heavy, suffocating. I had never put her in this position before, never forced her to choose. And now that I had, I could see the fear in her eyes. Not just fear of losing me, but fear of finally having to face the truth she had avoided for so long. She wasn't just caught between me and her family. She had been complicit in this. And now, she had to own it. She cleared her throat, her voice small. "Daniel, this isn't what I wanted." I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "No? Then what did you want, Vanessa?" She exhaled, rubbing her hands together. "I wanted a night where things went smoothly. A night where we could just be together without drama." I let out a slow, humorless laugh. "Smoothly? Vanessa, you let your family humiliate me. And you smiled through it." She flinched, but I wasn't done. "I have spent years trying to make this marriage work." I continued, my voice steady but firm. "I have ignored the little digs, the dismissive looks, the way your father never actually acknowledges my accomplishments because they don't fit his definition of success. I let it go every time your mother treated me like a guest in my own home. I let it go when your brother spoke to me like I was some charity case." She looked away, guilt flashing across her face. "But tonight wasn't little," I pressed. "Tonight was deliberate. It was planned. And you—" I pointed at her, my chest tightening. "You let it happen." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I leaned forward, my voice low. "But you did." She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as if trying to stop herself from breaking down. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to fight with my parents over something that could have just been a misunderstanding." I finished, my voice sharp. She nodded hesitantly. I let out a slow breath. gripping the edge of the table to keep my frustration in check. Vanessa, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a message. And you didn't just allow it, you reinforced it. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw it. Understanding. The realization that this wasn't just about a dinner. This was about every time she had chosen them over me. Every time she had let them belittle me because it was easier than standing up for me. Every time she had expected me to just take it. She let out a shaky breath. I don't know how to fix this. I stared at her, my jaw tightening. That's the problem, Vanessa. You shouldn't have to fix this. You should have never let it happen in the first place. Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we had never said out loud before. She wiped at her eyes and swallowed thickly. I love you. I exhaled sharply. That's not enough. Her face crumpled. I can't be in a marriage where I feel like I'm fighting for basic respect. I continued, my voice quieter, now more raw. I can't be with someone who is afraid to stand up for me. She let out a small, broken laugh. Afraid? Daniel, Yes. Afraid. I cut in. Because the truth is, you still care more about what they think than how I feel. She shook her head. That's not true. Then prove it. She froze. I leaned forward, my gaze locking onto hers. Prove it, Vanessa. Call your parents. Right now. Tell them what they did was wrong. Tell them you're not going to allow them to treat me like that anymore. She inhaled sharply. Daniel, No excuses, I interrupted. If you really mean it, if you really see what they did as wrong, then prove it. She looked down at her lap, her breathing uneven. The hesitation in her posture, the way she bit her lip, the way she thought about it instead of just doing it. That told me everything I needed to know. I sat back, my chest aching in a way I hadn't expected. She wasn't going to do it. She wasn't ready. Or maybe, she never would be. Tears slipped down her cheeks, her fingers tightening into fists. I don't want to lose you. I let out a slow breath. Then you shouldn't have treated me like I was disposable. Her shoulders trembled. For a long moment, we just sat there, staring at each other, both of us realizing that something between us had shifted. Something had broken, and I didn't know if it could be put back together. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want me to do? I met her gaze, my own voice steady. I want you to decide who you're married to, me or them. She sucked in a breath. I stood, running a hand through my hair. I'm going to bed. She wiped at her face, sniffling. Daniel, I need time to think, I said simply. And so do you. Then, without another word, I walked down the hall, leaving her sitting there alone. Because for the first time in our marriage, I was the one making the decision. And I wasn't sure she would like my answer. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts circling like vultures over everything that had happened. Over everything I had allowed to happen. The humiliation at that dinner, the years of being an outsider in my own marriage, the way Vanessa had hesitated when I asked her to take a stand. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. The bedroom door never opened. I had expected Vanessa to come in, to try to talk, to try to plead her case. But she didn't. I heard her moving around in the living room long into the night, heard the occasional sniffle, but she never came to find me. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to say. When the first traces of morning light slipped through the blinds, I finally sat up, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing against my bones. I ran a hand over my face and exhaled, knowing today wouldn't be any easier. Because if Vanessa had done nothing last night, that meant her family was still in damage control mode. And I wasn't going to make it easy for them. The moment I stepped out of the bedroom, my phone vibrated. I checked the screen. Richard, her father, we need to talk. Call me. I smirked. Of course, now he wanted to talk. I ignored the message and walked toward the kitchen, only to find Vanessa already there, standing by the counter with a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked exhausted, her eyes red, her shoulders slumped. She glanced at me, hesitant. Good morning. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee, taking my time, making her wait. She shifted uncomfortably. My dad wants to talk to you. I took a slow sip of coffee. Yeah, I saw. She bit her lip. Are you going to call him? I set my cup down and met her gaze. Why? So he can tell me I embarrassed myself? That I should have just accepted what happened and moved on. Her lips parted, but she hesitated. Because that's what's happening, isn't it? I continued. They're not calling to apologize. They're calling to control the narrative. To make sure I don't make them look bad. Vanessa exhaled sharply, looking down. Daniel, I. Before she could finish, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Margaret, her mother, we need to move past this. Call Richard back. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Wow, they don't even pretend, do they? Vanessa looked at me, uncertain. They don't care how I feel, I said. They just want to make this go away. She swallowed, gripping her coffee cup tighter. They're not good at apologies. I scoffed. No, Vanessa. They just don't do apologies. A tense silence stretched between us. Then another buzz. Eric, her brother, dude, just pick up. It's not that deep. That was it. I set my coffee down and turned to face Vanessa fully. Do you see this? Do you finally see it? She looked at my phone, at the string of messages, her expression conflicted. They are still acting like I'm the problem, I said, my voice calm but sharp. They are still trying to control the situation instead of actually taking responsibility. And you, I pointed at her, are still standing between us like a mediator instead of choosing a side. Her face crumpled. Daniel, I am choosing. Then show me, I interrupted. Because right now, all I see is someone who wants to smooth things over instead of actually facing the truth. She inhaled shakily, staring down at her coffee like it held all the answers. What do you want me to do? I grabbed my phone and held it out to her. You want to prove that you choose me? That you actually see what's wrong? Then text them back yourself. Her head snapped up. What? I kept my hand extended. Tell them the truth. Tell them they were wrong. That I was disrespected. That you're not going to let it happen again. She hesitated. Again. That was all the answer I needed. I exhaled slowly and pulled my phone back. That's what I thought. Her eyes filled with tears. Daniel. I held up a hand. Don't. Just don't. She wiped at her face, frustration bleeding into her expression. You don't understand. No, I cut in. I do understand. I understand that after everything, you still can't bring yourself to stand up to them. I understand that you care more about keeping the peace than you do about standing by your husband. Her hands trembled around her coffee cup. Then, finally, she whispered, if I do this, they'll never forgive me. I let her words settle between us. And then I nodded. Now you get it. Her breath hitched. They've never really forgiven you for marrying me, have they? I asked quietly. And they never will. She let out a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping. I've spent years thinking I was the one who didn't belong, I said. But the truth is, you don't either. Not really. Because the moment you stop playing by their rules, you'll be just as disposable as me. Tears slipped down her cheeks. That's not fair, isn't it? I murmured. She sniffled, wiping at her face, her hands shaking. I don't know what to do. I studied her for a long moment. Then, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and started typing. She watched me, confused, until she heard the sound of a message being sent. Her own phone buzzed a second later. She looked at it hesitantly, then picked it up, her eyes scanning the screen. Me. I'll make it easy for you, Vanessa. I'm leaving for a few days. You have time to decide where you stand. But when I come back, I need an answer, not an excuse. She sucked in a sharp breath. Daniel. I pocketed my phone, grabbed my keys from the counter, and walked to the door. She followed quickly, panic creeping into her voice. Wait, where are you going? I opened the door but paused, looking back at her one last time. I gave you a choice last night, I said softly. You didn't take it. She stared at me, shaking her head. You can't just. I can. I stepped out onto the porch, the morning air cool against my skin. She stood frozen in the doorway, her entire world shifting beneath her. And I, for the first time in years, I felt free. The engine hummed beneath my fingers as I gripped the steering wheel, but I didn't start driving. I just sat there, staring through the windshield, watching the early morning light stretch across the horizon. I wasn't leaving because I was running away. I was leaving because I needed to know if Vanessa would follow. I had spent years chasing after her love, after her acceptance, after her family's approval. And where had that gotten me? Sitting at a tiny table meant for children, while the people who were supposed to be my family barely acknowledged my existence. No more. I exhaled slowly and finally pulled out of the driveway, feeling a strange sense of relief settle over me. I didn't have a set destination, but I knew I needed space. Needed to be somewhere where the weight of last night's betrayal didn't press so heavily against my chest. I ended up at a small hotel just outside the city, The kind of place that didn't ask questions when a man checked in with nothing but a single bag and a tired expression. I paid for a few nights up front and let myself into the quiet room, the sound of the door clicking shut behind me feeling strangely final. Then I sat down on the edge of the bed, my phone still silent in my hand. I didn't text Vanessa. I didn't call. I had already said what needed to be said. Now it was up to her. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky, and still, nothing. No messages. No missed calls. Maybe that was my answer. I leaned back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. The logical part of me knew I was doing the right thing. That a marriage where I constantly had to fight for basic respect wasn't a marriage worth saving. But the other part? The part that still remembered the woman I fell in love with? That part was struggling. I didn't want to lose her. But I also didn't want to keep losing myself just to stay with her. By the time the sun had set, my phone finally buzzed. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. Vanessa. She exhaled sharply, as if she had been holding her breath. Daniel, where are you? I didn't answer. Did you think about what I said? She hesitated. Can we talk in person? I closed my eyes. That depends. Are you ready to give me an answer? Another pause. Then, yes. I exhaled slowly. Then meet me at the park by the lake. Tomorrow morning. No family. No distractions. Just us. She agreed without hesitation, which surprised me. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally realized what was at stake. The next morning, I arrived at the park early. The lake was calm, the water reflecting the early light, and I stood by the benches, waiting. I heard her before I saw her. The sound of hesitant footsteps on the gravel path. I turned, and there she was. Vanessa looked different. Not physically. She was still the same beautiful woman I had married, still the same person I had built a life with. But her face looked raw, uncertain, like she had spent the entire night wrestling with herself. She stopped a few feet away, clutching the strap of her purse. You really left. I nodded. Yeah. She swallowed. I didn't think you would. That's the problem, Vanessa, I said quietly. You never thought I would. Her eyes glistened, but she held my gaze. I thought about everything you said. About how I've let my family treat you. About how I've handled things. I didn't speak. I let her say the words herself. She took a shaky breath. I was wrong. Something in my chest tightened, but I stayed silent. She stepped closer. I should have stood up for you. I should have defended you the moment they treated you like you didn't belong. I should have realized that by staying quiet, I was choosing them over you. I studied her face carefully, looking for any sign of hesitation. I didn't see any. I called my parents, she admitted. I told them what they did was wrong, that I wouldn't tolerate it anymore, that if they want to be in our lives, they have to respect you. I blinked. That, I hadn't expected. And, I asked. She let out a short, humorless laugh. They were furious. My dad tried to say I was being dramatic. My mom cried. My brother told me I was making a big mistake. She looked up at me, but I didn't back down. A long silence stretched between us. She had done it. She had finally picked a side. But now, the question was it enough? She must have seen the uncertainty in my expression, because she took another step closer, her voice softer now. Daniel, I love you. And I know that's not enough, not after everything. But I see you now. I see what I let happen. And I swear to you, it won't happen again. I studied her for a long moment, letting the weight of her words settle. Then I exhaled. I believe you. Her breath hitched. You do? I nodded slowly. But believing you isn't the same as forgetting. She swallowed hard. I know. I let out another slow breath, glancing out at the lake. I need time, Vanessa. I need to know that this isn't just a temporary change. That you're not just saying this because you're afraid of losing me. She nodded, her hands gripping her purse tighter. Whatever you need. I'll prove it to you. I turned back to her. And you need to understand something. I'm done being treated like an outsider. Done pretending I'm okay with it. If you ever let them disrespect me again, if you ever make me feel like I don't belong, I will walk away. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't look away. I won't let that happen again. For the first time in years, I actually believed her. I reached for her hand, testing the waters, and she clutched mine tightly, like she was afraid to let go. Maybe we weren't past this yet. Maybe it would take time. But for the first time in our marriage, I felt like we actually had a chance. Because now, Vanessa wasn't just standing next to me. She was finally standing with me. Vanessa's fingers tightened around mine, as if she thought I might disappear if she let go. There was a desperation in her grip, a silent plea wrapped around her trembling touch. But desperation wasn't enough. Not anymore. I looked down at our hands, at the years we had built together, the love that had once been effortless, now hanging in the balance of a single choice. A choice she had finally made. She had stood up to her family. She had called them out. But was it because she had changed, or because she was afraid of losing me? That was the question. She wiped at her face, exhaling shakily. Daniel, I don't want us to end like this. I watched her, studying her face. The worry creased into her forehead, the raw vulnerability in her eyes. This wasn't the polished, composed woman I had married. This was someone realizing, for the first time, that love wasn't enough if respect wasn't there. Neither do I said finally. Her breath hitched, as if she had been bracing for something worse. I let go of her hand, not as a rejection, but as a statement. But I need time. Her face fell. Time. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. I believe you meant everything you said. I believe you want to change. But I also know that change doesn't happen overnight. I looked away, staring at the lake, my thoughts pulling me back to all the nights I had convinced myself that things would get better, only for them to get worse. She swallowed hard, wiping her face. So, what does that mean for us? I turned back to her. It means I'm not coming home right away. She flinched, her shoulders tensing. I exhaled slowly. I don't want to make a decision based on emotions. I need space to figure out if I can trust this change, if I can trust you not to let it happen again. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't argue. And that, more than anything, told me she knew this was the only way forward. How long? She whispered. I shook my head. I don't know. A few weeks. Maybe more. She nodded slowly, as if forcing herself to accept it. And if you decide you can't forgive me? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Then I won't come back. Her whole body tensed. Vanessa, I said gently, stepping closer. This isn't about punishing you. It's about making sure we don't end up back here again. Because if I come home before I'm ready, before I know for sure that I can trust you to stand by me, then this will keep happening. And I can't live like that anymore. She let out a shaky breath, nodding. I understand. A silence stretched between us, heavy and uncertain. She reached for my hand again, and this time, I let her. When you come back, she said softly, I want you to know that I'll be the wife you deserve. I swallowed past the tightness in my throat. I hope so. Her fingers brushed over mine one last time before she slowly let go, stepping back. I love you, Daniel. I nodded. I love you too. But love wasn't the problem. Respect was. And now, only time would tell if she had truly learned that. I watched as she turned, walking back toward her car, her posture uncertain, her steps slower than usual, like she wasn't sure if she was walking toward the future or away from it. I didn't know either. All I knew was that, for the first time in years, I wasn't the one chasing after her. I was finally standing still. And this time, she had to be the one to come back to me.